So, welcome back to the Raising Our Vibration podcast, where we explore higher consciousness through spiritual practice. And today, Stephen and I are going to talk about Eckhart Tolle's advice to be free from your mind. Okay, so this follows up on our podcast last week where we went into, described Eckhart Tolle's life-changing insight, which brought him into a profound and permanent state of deep peace and clarity and aliveness. And so at the end of that introductory chapter, where he intersperses throughout this book, Power of Now, people's questions to him as he taught this material to them. And so he says, people would come up to me and say, well, I want to have what you have. Can you show me how to get there? Right? Of course, obvious question. And he would say, here's a quote from the introduction, you have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise. Your mind is making too much noise. So the next chapter is called You Are Not Your Mind, right? So it's if the mind is what's blocking this sense of deep presence, this felt sense of being, then how do we move beyond the mind? Okay, so if the mind is this, it holds this self-image that we're identified with, how is it that we can release that self-image? And so in this chapter, You Are Not Your Mind, he describes three different techniques we can use. And he says that the reason it's so difficult to be free of the mind is that we are addicted to thinking. So a couple more quotes from him. So question again, why should we be addicted to thinking? Because you are identified with it, which means that you derive your sense of self from the content and activity of your mind. The term ego means different things to different people, but when I use it here, it means a false self created by unconscious identification with the mind. So we are so identified with the mind. We think that is who we am. We think, I think, therefore I am, a la Descartes, but we don't even realize that, okay? And sometimes we need to be given a taste of that to start to understand the difference between the mind, which we are living in our current culture. You know, we are living in all these thoughts and all this information processing and all this conceptual data and all these judgments and opinions and so on. We're living in that milieu so deeply that we don't recognize it. So in this chapter, he offers three techniques for being free of the mind and moving beyond that. And so we're going to go through those three techniques. And actually, the first one, we're going to add a little further inquiry onto. So it'll be, in effect, 4 techniques that we're going to guide you in today. So you have a taste of this, of what it might be like to be free from your mind. So what's the first technique? So the first technique, he says, is to watch the thinker. So to observe thoughts in the thinking mind. So let's just very simply go into this. And you can do this eyes open or eyes closed. And what I'm going to suggest for you to do is to call to mind a situation where you feel some tension or some conflict, something that you feel you have to figure out or think about to resolve. And so just think of one situation. And once you have that in mind, just imagine that you're sitting kind of behind your brain, since we often identify the brain kind of as the locus of the mind. Just imagine that you're sitting up behind your brain and you're looking at the activity of your brain. Now I'm going to do this by closing my eyes. And what I'm going to call to mind this situation. And then from that vantage point, kind of up behind me, I'm going to watch my mind at work. So call this situation to mind and just notice all the thoughts you have about this situation. So you might have an image of it in your mind. You might call to mind what that specific tension is, what it is you're trying to figure out. And then just notice all the different thoughts that come into your mind around that. So you might have thoughts of a possible solution, or just the thought of what somebody else said to you about that, or what you're feeling about that, or the conflicting thoughts you have. You might think different ways about this situation that you can't resolve. Just notice your thoughts. You might think, I don't know what to do about this. Oh, this is so frustrating. Why is this happening again? So you're just observing thoughts. Now notice that you can observe thoughts, that anything that you can look at is not you, the looker. So there's the one who is looking at or observing, and then there is what's observed, in this case, the thoughts. So somehow you are separate from the thoughts. So notice that you, and we emphasize this if we imagine ourselves sitting kind of apart from the mind and looking at the mind. Notice that whatever you are, the you who is observing is free from the thoughts, is able to stand outside the thoughts and observe them. And notice what happens as you recognize that you are separate from the thoughts, that you are the one who observes. Maybe those thoughts have less pull, they're less compelling, they don't seem so substantial. They're kind of happening off out there in front, while you back here are somehow wider and more spacious than that, separate from that. There's a freedom there. Because maybe you could have a different relationship to the thoughts if you are separate from them. So that's technique number one. Technique number two is to ask the question, what will my next thought be? And to do that as if you are a cat looking at a mouse hole. And imagine that the mouse hole is the origin of thought. So the mouse is like the thought that would come out, and you're the cat. You're just sitting there, alert, attending. So ask yourself, from that alert, attentive watching of the mouse hole of thought, what will my next thought be? Just hold that inquiry, hold that question. What will my next thought be? So you may have noticed that your mind goes quiet for a moment. That inquiry, that alert attention to that question creates a gap, a space in which there is no thought. So again, ask that question again. Notice what happens. What will my next thought be? And see if you can notice that gap, that silence in the mind. And just feel into that. Feel into that silence. The mind is still. You may not be able to describe what that is, but there's a freedom there. And now Stephen's going to guide us in the next two techniques, which will build on this inner freedom from the thinking mind.
Thank you, Kevin. And love and blessings to everybody on this beautiful day, wherever you are. So I want you to rest in this gap, this silence that Kevin was guiding you into, the silence in the mind. And I'm going to introduce you to two techniques. One is the use of sound, and the other is the use of breath and embodying presence. So just as Kevin said, wherever you are, I'm hoping if you're driving that you've pulled off the road by now. Wherever you are, as Kevin was speaking to you. So you can listen to me with eyes closed. You can have eyes open as well. But if you've got eyes open, don't concentrate on the screen or on me. Be aware of this space. So there's this deep presence, this felt sense of being, just as Kevin was guiding you. You can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise, because we're so addicted to thinking, because we think we are the mind. We're not our mind. We are not our thoughts. And we think we are the body. We're not our body. And just as Kevin guided you, there's this gap, there's this silence in the mind. So I'm going to build on that through sound. So with your eyes closed, it might be easier if you close your eyes at this point. Bring awareness to what you hear. Just notice what sounds are present in your awareness. So these might be an air conditioner sound. At the moment, I've got an air conditioner on here in Japan. Just notice the sound. You're viewing them like waves on the surface of the ocean of pure awareness. So not as objects, not focusing on the sounds, just being aware of what's happening. And as you become aware of the sounds, also you might become aware that the sounds have a particular orientation. The sound might be coming all around you, or Could be coming from a direction. And there's also stillness here that you're present to. There's a stillness just underneath the sound. If, for example, you've got a continuous sound, you might notice that as you relax, the stillness becomes more obvious. So just by noticing that there is stillness in the room or in the moment, then the moment you start to notice that it's still outside, that there's a stillness between some of the sounds, then you're still inside. Isn't that remarkable? The moment you notice that it's still outside, then in fact, your perception is becoming still. You're still inside. You have to be still just for a moment. So this is where the body is very important. You have to be still for just a moment to even notice that there is this silence and stillness outside, just as Kevin was sharing. When our mind's so busy, we don't even notice that there is the possibility of silence or stillness. So you're already beginning to meditate the moment you notice that there is stillness. Quite often you can do this during the night. You know, you wake up and it's a very silent, still time. And you just notice that there's silence in the room. It's like that. You're just noticing. Even though there's sounds, there's also stillness between the sounds. Or even though the air conditioner is this continuous sound, that underneath it, I'm aware of the stillness in the space. You can't notice it by thinking about it. That's the amazing thing to notice. To notice that there is stillness, you have to become still inside. It's so simple. To notice that it's silent, you have to become silent inside. So there's a shift in consciousness. The simple fact of becoming aware that there is stillness around you means you've become still within. It means for a moment, the stream of thinking has ceased. But you're not asleep. You're alert and awake. And a space is opening up inside you. So there's all manner of sounds that can happen around you. Even right now, nature, perhaps. Maybe you can hear the sounds of animals where you are, or wind. Perhaps it's raining. And if you bring to mind the deepest dimensions of these kinds of sounds, when you walk in a forest, so I have a forest just outside my door, then when it's very quiet, you actually hear all kinds of subtle sounds. But underneath the subtle sound of the forest, there's an all-pervading silence and stillness. So what you're doing right now is going into the forest of your mind. So you're noticing sounds if they arise without labeling, without saying this is a bird or that's a dog barking. You're just noticing. You're just present. And you're not judging what you hear. This is free of judgment, free of opinion. You're just aware of the silence underneath the sounds and in between the sounds. And you become present the very moment you're aware of the silence underneath the sounds, or the silence between the sounds, because the mind has become still. Now let's move into embodying this stillness and presence. through energy in the body. So I just want you to now bring awareness to your body sensations. Just notice what's happening in your body and notice any sensations that are present now. And as you feel these unfolding sensations, see if you can experience them not as objects, but just as experiences playing out in this ocean of awareness. Almost as if your body and the sensations are like waves on this ocean of awareness. So you're just relaxing back, nothing to do, just simply being aware, just like you were with sounds, being aware of the silence underneath sounds. And so here we're going to use the breath as awareness to guide us into this portal of stillness that Kevin was referring to, this silence in the mind. So just notice your breathing. So you've gone from being aware of the body sensations without judgment to now just becoming aware of your breath without judgment. Just be aware of where your breath arises naturally for you in your body, effortlessly. It could be in your nose, it could be in your chest or your belly. Just notice. Notice as you breathe in. And when you come to the end of the breath, there's a brief moment, a still point between that breath in and the exhalation. Just notice it. And again, at the end of the out breath, there's another brief still point before the in breath starts. So you're just dropping deep into presence through the energy of the breath in the body. This is very powerful, and these are powerful points. The breath can bring you home into presence. The breath and the points of stillness are these wonderful portals into the stillness beyond the mind, if you become aware of them. Even as you're listening, when you breathe out, at the end of the out breath, there's a complete cessation of all movement. And when you pay attention to it, it might become just a little bit longer. You're not trying, you're not controlling it in any way, just being aware, paying attention to the energy in the body through the breath. And when you pay attention to the stillness, it naturally becomes a bit longer. And the moment that you're aware of that stillness, you reach that dimension, you open that awareness within you of stillness. So the in-breath and the out-breath, using the body sensations, can be so very helpful. They contain the entire movement of life and the universe. The beginning of the in-breath that arises from the stillness is birth, growth. And then when it reaches maturity and it rests in that point of cessation, that stillness, then there comes the reverse movement. And you surrender into the exhalation and recognize it for what it is. This natural movement, this return journey back into where it all started. Stillness. Just the exhalation, surrendering to it. No resistance, just feeling this deep alignment, because you realize that you're letting go. And instead of the growth on the inhalation, there's now the letting go, the surrender, and the vanishing. You might even notice that the physical body seems to be vanishing too. You haven't noticed it. You've been so aware of the energy of the breath and these movements of energy, the birth, as you breathe in to the stillness, and then the exhalation, the letting go, the surrender. If you surrender to it, then you can feel into the deep alignment with the whole spiritual process. But if you're grabbing onto it and trying hard, or if you're stuck in mind, it can be quite painful to surrender. So here you're learning the movement of the cosmos, the shift, transformation, and change. You could even say that the letting go opens you to something very important on the out-breath, because it's when you let go in your life, when you reach that dissolution, then great potential, the potential of the infinite emerges. And you can experience all this, the universal movement, the ingoing and the outgoing, with the breath. Dropping into presence, this spaciousness and stillness. So there's just presence. And you're allowing the body to participate in this presence in every cell. Every cell of your body becomes present to this opening, this potential, this surrender to stillness. Feel the aliveness and presence in every cell of your being. Feel it in your feet. Your hands. Your spine and crown. The entire energy field that pervades the body becomes part of presence. At first, you might feel like you're observing this inner body feeling, but the deeper you go, the more you recognize the presence and the feeling of the inner body. And the moment you're aware of presence, you are that presence. You become that presence. Your entire being becomes aware. What a beautiful, peaceful, calm presence. Just that. The entire body is present as you sit here. You are that presence. No name, no content, no past or future. Formless vastness, spaciousness. You are that. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you everybody for listening. deepest gratitude always for your presence.
Thank you, Stephen, for that beautiful guiding. Thank you all for participating with us. And if you'd like more information on meditation and awareness practices like this, you can visit us at raisingourvibration.net. We'd love to hear from you there. Until next time, bye for now.